Hello, everyone. Welcome to the North Carolina DevFest 2022. My name is Roman. I am a Flutter GDE. I am also a lead organizer at GDE Lawrence. And in this session, in the previous sessions, this block of sessions have been about Flutter. Everybody knows what Flutter is, unless you've been living under a rock. But Flutter is this amazing open source UI toolkit supported by Google that allows you to develop beautiful, natively compiled experiences in a multi-platform type of aspect where you can hit 6 different distinct platforms. And if you count embedded, you can target 7 different platforms using one single code base. So in the previous session, we were talking about, again, what's new in Flutter. Scott was introducing you to some of the components about like the flexibility of widgets and whatnot. In this session, I'm going to be discussing how you tackle Flutter for the web, and how you can leverage something like Firebase hosting so that you can host your own Flutter web application. So Flutter web applications are no different from the native counterparts. It's just that you're using Flutter, but you're targeting a different device. In this case, you're targeting the browser. In this session, we're going to make it very hands-on. So I hope you guys are both listening in and watching wherever you are. Just wanted to make sure that things are going well on your side and you guys can see the screen. So let's make sure that everybody is tuned in. Awesome, perfect. So let's proceed. So let's make sure that you stick around. Sit back, relax. If you want to follow along, you can do so. I am going to be dropping a link for those of you online and want to follow along. I am going to be dropping the link for the code lab that we're going to be using, which was custom created for this particular session, where I'm going to walk you through how to develop a very simple, personal portfolio Flutter web app. And then we're going to use that web app and we're going to deploy it to Firebase Hosting. Firebase is this suite of amazing features that sit on top of the Google Cloud that you can use to build robust mobile web applications, server applications, again, on top of the Google Cloud using Firebase. We're going to be tapping into Firebase hosting in this particular session. In other sessions, in the upcoming session, I'm going to show you a little bit more of the breadth of features that Firebase has to offer. So in this particular case, we're only going to be targeting a Flutter for the web, and we're going to be deploying that to Firebase hosting. So let me start by sharing my screen. I'm going to be sharing my screen, and then you should be able to see, what I'm seeing. I just dropped the link to the code lab that we're going to be following along. So this is going to be very hands-on. If you guys want to follow along, perfect. If not, you can use this to do like your own, if you want to do it on your own, follow it on your own, more like a type of an on-demand type of aspect, you can just grab this code lab and complete it. So what we're going to be building in this workshop is going to be a simple Flutter web application. We're going to call it like our personal portfolio. We're going to be learning about the Flutter, how do you create Flutter user interfaces with ease. We're going to be discussing a couple of strategies on Flutter layouts using just core widgets. We're going to be implementing explicit animations, and you will see a little bit more about that. We're going to be implementing material icon fonts. And at the end, when we build our Flutter web application, we're going to be deploying it to the cloud. We're going to be deploying it to Google Cloud Firebase hosting, which is a free, there's a free tier on the Firebase hosting that you can host your own web applications, not just Flutter web applications, but any web application you can host it in there, with some decent margins for you to, some specs that you can use for your free application. So it's pretty good. Some quotas. So actually, let's start right away. And then one of the prerequisites, and again, as you can see, we're in step number 1 of this code lab. If you go to step number 2, I'm detailing here what are the prerequisites of this workshop. So you need to have at least the Flutter framework installed. You must have NPM package manager for installing the Firebase CLI and all of those things. And at a minimum, you should have an editor such as VS Code. Like Visual Studio Code is the IDE that I use for developing Flutter applications. but you can use like IntelliJ, you can use Android Studio for your Android applications and whatnot. And you can even do it for that as well. So yes, I'm using Visual Studio Code. So those are the 3 prerequisites for this workshop. Or again, you can just watch and see how I build it, but you will see, let's see how much we can cover in 1 hour. So let's begin with, I've already covered what is it that we're going to be building, what are the prerequisites of this workshop, and the next thing is we're going to start by creating a brand new project. So if you follow along again on this workshop, we're going to start from scratch. So let's start from the beginning by creating a brand new project in Flutter. So the first thing that you do once you have installed the framework and all, you say Flutter create, and then you name your project. In this case, I'm going to call it Roman Web Portfolio, something like that. So you could call it just that, and it's going to create. It's asking me that there's a new version of Flutter. That's perfect. But I'm going to proceed and create my project. So I created a project, and if you see here, it creates a new Flutter project called Roman Web Portfolio. So I'm going to make sure to open into that folder to make it the root of the project. So I'm going to go to my documents of Flutter Web, and then I created this project right here. I'm going to open up into that project. Perfect. You get something by default. You already get like some scaffolding, which is what I'm going to show you right now. One of the great things about tackling Flutter for the web is it's actually the lowest barrier to entry when it comes to becoming a Flutter developer is using Flutter Web, because you don't have to install like Xcode for iOS, Android Studio for Android. Immediately, you can use Chrome as your device. And once you download the Flutter framework, you can immediately start developing for the web, which is very, very convenient. So I'm going to just run whatever you get out of the box when you do the Flutter Flutter create new project, Flutter run. And of course, we've already discussed a couple of the greatest features of Flutter, which are, you see, for example, like here, you can target either Mac OS or Chrome. In this case, I'm going to tackle Chrome, which is fine. But we're not going to be delving too much into, for example, like what are a couple of the great features of Flutter about like when you're developing. One of them is hot reload, and the other, and then you're going to see it right here. Hot reload is the capability of whenever you're developing your application, you can see the changes in real time as you're coding. When you hit R, for example, if you can see here, like it tells you how to debug your application. You can just hit R and you reload. That's hot reload, or you can do Shift R. That is a full a reload of your application, which even destroys the state and all of that. But for now, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to hit R, which also performs a hot restart regardless. If you do Shift R, it's the same thing, because it kind of like works the same in the web, hot restart or hot reload. So you should be able to do that. So now let's continue by, you see, this is exactly what you're going to get out of the box. But what we're going to be targeting is, remember, we're going to be building this sample Flutter Web personal portfolio application. So let's proceed. So I already went through the first 2 steps, and now we just created the project. So we should be ready to go. Let's proceed. So the first thing that you need when you're building even a Flutter application, just like any other application, is you start from the main.dart. So the main.dart is this file that is provided to you, which is the entry point to the application. So I'm gonna remove everything in my main.dart. If you can see it right here, this is the structure that you get out of the box. And then if you locate the lib folder, and there is a main.dart folder right underneath it, you will get the main.dart. So please, let's proceed to step number 4 in the code lab that I provided. I'm going to drop the link one more time, just in case, some of you may not have gotten it. And I'm going to drop it in the general chat as well. There it is. Or also you can even go into Roman Jaquez, that web, that app, and then you can go to my workshops. Like all of the workshops in here are available for free, and you can just use them. I am actually tackling this one right here called Flutter Code Lab IO Extended, creating Flutter web apps in the Google Cloud using Firebase Hosting. So this is the one that I'm tackling, just in case some of you guys are watching and you want to know which is the one that I'm doing. So I'm doing this particular code lab, which is created by yours truly, so that you guys can follow along and you can build your own web apps as well. Great. So the first thing that we require is that you import the material package. So the material package is the first line in the main.dart. It imports the material packages, what gives it the extra layer of stylings to your applications, so that you can immediately hit the ground running with a great mature design language, such as the Material 3 in Flutter. So then the next thing that you need, that we ask you to do, is called the main method. The main method is the most important method in the Flutter application because it bootstraps it. So it's the first method that gets executed. It's kind of like in Java, you have like the main method, in C# as well. Dart is no different. So you start by launching or calling the main method in your application. What this does is immediately starts creating the widget tree, because here we're going to be requiring like the first widget that is going to be inserted in the widget tree. So we're going to call it personal portfolio app. Creating widgets in Flutter is nothing more than just you creating a class that extends either stateless widget or stateful widget. Stateless widgets just get painted on the screen once. And then as opposed to then the stateful widgets, they're the other side of the coin, where you actually rebuild multiple times during the life cycle of your application while your state remains in memory, and then your widgets rebuild based on changes that occur in your state. So we're going to start with a stateless widget. So we're just going to be painting something on the screen, just showing it like that. So you see, creating a stateful widget, a stateless widget, I'm sorry, creating the stateless widget is just a matter of creating a class that extends stateless widget. You have a constructor, and then you override the build method. The build method is the most important method in a widget, not on the application itself, but on a widget. Why? Because the framework calls the build method, and then this is the first method that gets called when this is actually what builds your structure, your widget structure, and it places your widget in the widget tree, building a hierarchy. So let's continue. So you see, I created a widget called personal portfolio app, which it will encapsulate my web application. And then right inside of the build method, I have to start building my hierarchy, like my widgets, right? So that's exactly what I'm going to be building. Perfect. So then the next step we're still in step number 5, where I create that. Then the next thing that you need to do is you build your structure in the build method. So I'm going to copy this, what's supposed to be in the build method. And then if you see here, what I'm returning out of the build method is yet another widget. So I'm returning a widget called material app. This material app widget is the one that kind of encapsulates and will provide some of the stylings, again, from the material library, that will make my application very, very easy to use, very, using the material library, so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel as far as like styling goes and whatnot. You have to remember, we were showing like the little sash on the corner. This is just one flag called debug show check mode banner. Just set it to false, and then it will get rid of it. And then last but not least, the material app has a home. A home meaning kind of like the landing page. What is the first page that we're going to be showing to our users? Within the material app, you set up the home. The home, then I'm just going to set it up as a scaffold. The scaffold then is another widget that allows you to set up like kind of like the important parts of a page in a Flutter application. So the scaffold provides you with a body, provides you with a header, like, with an app header, a drawer, a bottom navigation bar, and other components that you can use to execute and accelerate your development. So we still haven't created like something visible yet. So we need to start making more progress on that. So inside of the scaffold, I am going to just center my personal portfolio. Personal portfolio will be yet another custom Flutter widget that we will create. And as you recall, creating a Flutter widget is nothing more than just creating a class that extends either stateless or stateful, override the build method, and then you build your widget structure right inside of it. So I'm going to go to the next step so that we can now build that personal portfolio widget. And that personal portfolio widget will be, in this case, will be a stateful widget. Why will it be a stateful widget? Because I will be maintaining some state as the widget rebuilds many times. So I'm going to just do that. You see it has the red squiggly line. It's because it doesn't exist yet. And then creating a stateful widget, in this particular case, it involves two-step process. You have to create the widget that will represent the visible portion of the application, but you also need to create another class which will hold on to the state of that widget. As that widget rebuilds, the state remains in memory, and then the widget rebuilds as there are changes in the state. So it's a two-step process, like I mentioned. So the first step, you need to create the stateful widget class. And if you see here, I'm going to do it using word wrap. Here we go. And then you create a stateful widget, and then you have to override the create state, which actually will create then the state that in memory that will hold that the data that your widget requires in order to rebuild and to show changes during the life cycle of the application. And then last but not least, you grab the second part of the stateful widget creation, which is the actual state. So here, this is the one that actually contains the build method, which actually then gets triggered when there's any changes in the state. The build should be re-executed so that it reflects the changes that are happening in the state, and then your users can visualize it on the screen. So that's a great thing about Flutter. So now that we've created that, now we need to, like I mentioned, we need to continue building up on our structure of this personal portfolio. So remember, like I mentioned, you override the build method, and this is where you build your widget hierarchy. You create all your widgets, you implement widget composition by building widgets out of other widgets and whatnot. So far, it's been very simple. We've only created the personal portfolio app, which is the rootmost widget. Then it has the material app underneath it. Then the material app is kind of wrapping our personal portfolio widget right here. Now we need to start building up on that portfolio. So let's do that. Let's go to the next step. The next step is step number 7, where we will build the structure of that portfolio. So let me zoom in a little bit just so that you guys can see it. Actually, I think you can see it pretty much well there. Now you can see, for example, like what is the structure that we're going to be building. I like to build my UIs like this and also showing it to other people. That way you can see the schematics. What is going to entail this application? So if you see from here, you can see right away that you can see like a center widget. So it will be centering the whole structure. Then you're going to need a container, like a column widget. You see there's a column because we're going to be laying out our widgets in a vertical fashion. Then you're going to have other containers and text widgets inside. And then we're going to be implementing our structure. We're going to be building it like that. So you build it by bringing in other widgets. You build widgets based on other widgets. You can create your own custom widgets, but they will be pretty much based on other ones. So let's proceed. So what is the first thing that I want to do? I want to set up something global for my application, like a color. So you can just grab this final property. Again, for the sake of this application, you can just keep it like this, but of course it's better to use like a separate class, a separate a separate entity that will hold those values for you. For now, for the sake of this tutorial, let's just add a property that will color for our application. For example, let's just use like you can pick like your own color if you want to. You can do any of that. Perfect. Now the next thing, like we showed in our schematics, is we're going to be adding a center widget. So let's go to our build method, and that's exactly what we're going to be returning. We're going to say return center. Center is just any other widget. Everything in Flutter is a widget, even positional widgets like center, align, positioned. You can do all of those using those type of widgets. So what this center widget will do is just center it in the center of the screen, horizontally and vertically, whatever you put inside of this widget. So center has a child, just like other widgets have a child that take only a single widget. Or you can have other widgets have children. We will see it in a minute, where that they can take an array or like a collection of other widgets. So our center widget, I'm just going to copy it right here. The center widget is going to be holding a column because we want to have a column that is centered in the middle of the screen. And then if you can see here, I have 3 properties. Main axis size, meaning I'm going to only occupy whatever, as many child widgets as I have. That is going to be my height pretty much. So I'm going to assume the minimum height will be as many widgets as I have. The main axis alignment, I'm aligning, this is the main axis alignment, meaning the main axis is the vertical. So I'm going to center it vertically, and the cross axis alignment, meaning the opposite axis, meaning the horizontal. So I want to center it horizontally as well. And then my children, like I mentioned, some widgets take a child, some other widgets take children. So in this case, a column takes more than one child. So that's why we set up the children. So let's proceed. We're going to continue. I'm going to be adding like an image to my to that widget, to this page. I want to set up like my avatar. So where do you get an image? You can pull your image from anywhere. In my particular case, I'm going to grab it from my Gmail account. I have it even right here. This is the path. So I would encourage, if you have an image somewhere, part of your portfolio or anything, you can just do so. You can just grab an image, you can bring it in, and then you can add it there. So I'm going to grab this property. I'm gonna create like another property, like a global property, where I'm gonna be setting like a final string that will represent my image, like my avatar. If I just grab the avatar and show it to you like on a separate page, you will see it's just a regular page, a regular image. So this image, and we're gonna add it to our web application. So let's do that. You can pull it from anywhere. You can pull it from GitHub. You can do anything. So I'm grabbing that and I'm bringing it over, and then I'm going to set it to be my avatar image. So I will be using this avatar image for when I build my, when I build my, like I said, like I'm going to be building this whole structure in here, right? So let me save that. Now let's proceed. What I want to do is create this effect, like this image that will be like a circular. You could use like widgets, for example, like a circle avatar, but I wanted to show you how you can use some of the core widgets to build structures like this. So one of the tricks that you can do to actually set up your image to look like a circle, you can use a container. So for example, in this case, I'm going to use a container. I'm going to give it the same width and height so that it's like a perfectly squared, for example. And then I'm going to be adding some margin around it. For example, I'm going to be adding sorry about that. I'm going to be adding like a margin at the bottom, like that. This is how you add margins to a container. You can just say edges that's not only 20 pixels at the bottom. And then you can add some decoration to it. Sorry about that. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cough. So let's proceed. So I'm going to be using the decoration. I'm going to be adding the decoration right here, if you can see it. Yeah, I developed a little bit of a cough. Sorry about that. Great. So now that we have the decoration, we're going to be adding like some effects to that. So here we show you how to add like some border around it. So to make it look circular, this is the part that actually adds the image to the container. So you need to add a network image, which actually then feeds that path that we created up here. If you see this avatar image, then it's going to be fed into the container. So if you see there, that is going to create the decoration image, which will be kind of like a background image to the container. And then we're going to add some border around it, like with the same color, with a width of 8, like a border around that container. So let's save that and let's proceed. So I'm going to be reloading my application. Let's see what we can start seeing. So I'm going to reload. And there it is. So far, you won't see the image because we haven't built the application yet. And because I'm using it in a local host, and this image is being hosted on a HTTPS, that's pretty much what's going on. Perfect. Let's proceed now. We should be good. Now, after that, we're going to continue with the rest of the structure, which should be like a text widget. You see now the structure is going to be a column. So we have the image on top. Then we're going to have some like text widgets underneath it, if you can see it right there. So let's start creating those. Because it's part of the same column. So all I have to do is just add those widgets right underneath it. So if you see, I am going to just collapse my container, and then right within the column, all I need to do is just add these text widgets. So remember, everything in Flutter is a widget. Text widgets, images are widgets. Structural widgets, kind of like columns, flexible widgets like that, columns, rows, stacks, all of those are widgets. So now I'm adding like a text widget with some the same color that I'm using, a font size and the bold and the styling to it. So I'm going to be reloading, and there you go. You see now my name in there, and we're going to be continuing by adding these other 2 widgets. So I'm going to be adding another text widget, and I'm going to be adding some spacing right underneath that text widget, which will give some spacing around it. It will give it like some breathing room. So let me just do this. Perfect. Let me save and reload. You see like the image, it says like the image is not able to be loaded, but we'll take a look at that later, because once we push it, once we deploy it, it will actually work. So let's just keep moving along. So if you're following along, you should be able to see a circle. The image is still not displaying. You will see your name, and then you will see another one like with a title, something like that. Perfect. So far so good. Now we're going to be proceeding with the last part of this structure, which is going to add like let's add like a button. So if you see the widget right here, like you see these things right here, like with the little envelope and the email, that's going to be like a button. So a button, in everything in Flutter is a widget. You can create a button, but then you inside of the button, you can create any complex structure as you wish. So that's exactly what we're going to be tackling right now. So if anybody's following along, all you need to do is now continue. Here we are on step number 7, and then I'm going to scroll all the way down where we have like a text button. So I'm going to copy that text button right underneath the size box right there. I'm going to format it. Then I'm just going to go over a little bit of what we did right now. So the text button is going to have an unpressed. It requires an unpressed because it's a clickable element. And inside of the text button, then you can build anything. In this case, I'm building a row. And then if you see here is a row that has a main axis alignment center, meaning center it or on the horizontal axis, and also occupy the minimum amount of space based on how many children you have. Perfect. So then as the children of the row, because it's a row, contrary to a column, like Scott was mentioning earlier, a row is a flex widget. And then the children will place themselves in a horizontal fashion from left to right. And then here, we're going to be adding an icon, a little bit of spacing. We're going to be adding another text widget. And then this text widget, I am going to add some styling to it. So let me save this and reload. So if I do that, we should be able to see like actually, let me save it appropriately. Let me reload it again. Perfect. And you see this just becomes like a button, like something that you can click on, but we're not going to make it actionable. In step number 7, I say, why don't you proceed and do other things with the button? You can add other buttons if you want to. You can add like one for your, like I was saying, like the website, your LinkedIn account, anything, go to town. At least I'm just showing you how to build like this simple structure. And you see, it has been no different than if you do it for native, unless again, you're tapping into some native capabilities. But at this point, Flutter is Flutter regardless. Yes, you can rebuild your application and verify that everything is in place. So I like the way that it's looking. We've made really great progress, minus the image not displaying, which is okay. Now let's proceed to the next step. So in step number 8, this is just a bonus that I'm adding. So this is how to add animations to your widgets. Animations in Flutter are what give your applications like that extra kick, like that extra punch that differentiates it from other applications. The way that you add animations in Flutter, you can either use implicit animation widgets, which are like right out of the box widgets that you can add to your applications, and then you immediately get some animations. If you use explicit widgets, explicit animations in Flutter, it gives you a lot more control. And you can actually have more fine-grained control over how your animations operate, because then you're able to tap into the inner workings of how Flutter renders every frame on the screen. And then you can piggyback off of that, and then you can create butter smooth animations and very cool stuff. So implicit animations give up control over convenience, while then explicit animations give you a lot more control over your animation. So let's create one of those animations. So I'm going to animating some of the widgets. What are we going to be doing? I think we're going to be animating a widget that makes it look like it's like a glowing effect under like the if you see here, for example, like if I go back to the overview, if you see the badge, like that widget, like the avatar image has like a glowing effect. So let's exactly do that. Let's build that effect. Let's go back to our step where we were in step number 8. So we're going to be adding that glowing effect. How do you do that? Actually, let's go here right to where we have our state class. the personal portfolio state. And the way that you incorporate animations into your applications is by bringing in one elements of from Flutter that you can that allows you to tap into the animation capabilities, into the inner workings, the inner clock of Flutter, so that then you can synchronize things accordingly. The way to do it is by adding a mixin. A mixin is the type of class that adds capabilities to a class without engaging into multiple inheritance. So the way that you do it is you say with ticker provided state mixin. Ticker provider state mixin is a class that then provides a ticker provider, or makes the class that implements it a ticker provider. A ticker provider is a class that dispatches a ticker. Now, a ticker is nothing more than an object that allows you to tap into the inner workings of the inner clock of Flutter, and then you're able to be in synchronization with how the frames get rendered and how they get painted on the screen. So that ticker instance allows you to tap into the inner synchronization of the mechanism by setting a callback, so that it can be called once per animation frame. So every time it ticks, like every animation frame, like every 60 frames per second, then every tick calls your animation controller, and then it performs what it needs to do, meaning rebuilding your widget that many times. So I'm gonna go into more details, and then I'm gonna show you how that works. So the first thing that you do is you add the ticker provider state mixin. The ticker provider state mixin is what's gonna make this class a ticker provider. The first thing you do is you create like an instance of the animation controller. Animation controller is what controls the animation. So you do animation controller. Actually, I'm just going to copy it from here, just the same way that you guys are doing. So you have your animation controller. It's all good. Now, the animation controller needs someone to tell it, this is the ticker that you're going to need to be listened to. That you need to be listening to, so that every time Flutter repaints the screen about 60 frames per second, it synchronizes the animation with it so that it goes along with it. That way, every time there's a frame to be painted, then we kind of insert ourselves into that mechanism. So then you need to even for other applications and whatnot, it is also suggested to clean up your resources, clean up after yourselves. Whenever you're using controllers, because these are very memory, memory hogs, consume a lot of memory consumption assets, you need to initialize them like once at a minimum, and you dispose of them when the widget gets removed from the widget tree. So in this case, we're overriding the init state method of the state widget. We call super.init state, and then we initialize the controller. So the controller, we tell it, this is who's going to be providing you with a ticket provider, with a ticker provider, and then you're going to execute an animation for 2 seconds. Animation controllers, what they do is they just execute an animation between 0 and 1, and they extrapolate the values for the duration that you give it, and they perform the animation in synchronization with with Flutter's rendering pipeline, pretty much. And then all we're saying here is just execute this animation for 2 seconds and repeat it. Just repeat it, from 0 to 1, from beginning to end, and then start again all the way from the beginning, and then just execute it infinitely. Again, like I mentioned, whenever you create entities that truly consume the capabilities and the resources of your device, you need to make sure to dispose of them, because that is the proper way to clean up after yourself. Those memory intensive entities like animation controllers. Perfect. So now the next thing is we're going to create now that widget that actually is going to perform that fading and scaling animation that is going to be looking like a glowing animation. How do you do that? First thing we're going to be doing is we're going to grab the existing container that it is here. You see this container right here. You're gonna just move it to the side, right? Or actually, what we're gonna do is, let me just give it some spacing so that you can see it. So what we're going to do is, if you see it right here, this is our container. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap it inside a stack. Why a stack? Because a stack places the widgets one in front of each other in some sort of like a layered pancake sort of style, like one in front of the other. If you see it, let's say from if you're standing, you can see like the bottommost widget is actually the one farther in the back, and the topmost widget is actually the one in front, right? So for actually the bottommost widget is the one in front. The first widget is actually the one in the back. If you were looking at it from, let's say, if you're standing on top of a stack of pancakes, for example. In this case, this is the one that's going to be behind the image and is going to be performing the animation. So that's exactly what we want to do. We want to do it a stack because the image will be in front, the glowing effect will be in the back, and we're going to grab a stack for that. So I'm going to grab the stack. I'm going to replace this whole container. And then we have one stack with two children, with the child, this child that will perform the glowing animation. And this one is just our regular, the one that was there before, the one for the image. So now we need to make this tick. We need to make this pop. How do you make this container right here? How do you make this container glow? And how do you make it scale at the same time? Let me show you how to do that. You use those explicit animation widgets, like I mentioned, for example, the scale transition. The scale transition will perform an animation using a tween. You give it a tween, and then the tween generates an animation, and then you give it to this scale transition. Let me just copy it so that you can see it. I'll copy the scale transition widget, and I will replace it with that glowing circle widget. And then let me explain it again. So the scale transition has a scale property, and then the scale takes an animation, if you see it right there. So it takes an animation. You can generate animations using a tween. A tween is, again, it stands for between. So it creates an animation between one value and another. In this case, it will perform an animation between 1, meaning full scale of the child that it wraps, and it will end at 1.5 of its scale. Then the animation will have the parent, which is the controller that I have up there. Remember, the controller is a controller that it will last for 1 second, and it will repeat the animation. And it's going to have a curve, an ease in out curve. So kind of like a smooth curve. Then, of course, then all we do is you wrap this scale transition. You wrap your container around that transition, and then that should be it. So let me reload it, and now you should be able to see it. How that performs that animation. You see, very cool. So it performs that. But now we want to now perform the fading transition. How do we do the fading transition in it? Very simple. All you need to do is now wrap the existing scale transition. You wrap it inside a fade transition, which is another type of widget, another explicit animation widget. So I'm going to wrap this widget inside a fade transition widget. And it's pretty much similar to the other one, to the scale transition, because it needs a value, in this case, an opacity, but you give it in an animation, you give it the animation the same way that you give it kind of like the transition one, using a tween of double, meaning it's going to perform an animation between 2 values. This case is going to start at 1, meaning full opacity, and it's going to end at 0, meaning completely transparent. So now we're going to just wrap our fade transition, wrap our scale transition inside a fade transition. Then the container is wrapped inside of all those two, and those 2 animations using the same controller, lasting for 2 seconds and repeating themselves, they're going to be performing that effect of the glowing effect that I was just showing you. So let me rebuild, and now you see kind of like the glowing effect occurring there, and that's it. You see how simple it was? Very simple. You're able to create like very simple structures in Flutter. You can add animations using explicit animations, which give you a lot of control on how you perform the animations on your widgets. You can tap into the inner clock of Flutter so that you can synchronize things, and things get executed at 60 frames per second, and then you can tap into those capabilities. That way you can make your animations a lot more robust, a lot more attractive, more engaging, and whatnot. So that was just a bonus. This was actually another bonus. If you want to continue on this one, perfect. This is just performing another animation, but on the whole center widget. But just in the interest of time, I'm going to be moving along. And now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be building this application ready to be deployed for Firebase hosting. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing now. So next step, I'm going to skip this one, and we're going to try to host this Flutter web application. As you can see right here, you'll see my image later once we deploy it. But now what we're going to be doing is hosting it in Flutter and Firebase hosting. So if you see Firebase is this suite of serverless services that are built on top of the Google Cloud that allow you to build very robust mobile web and server applications. So now, how do you do that? The first thing that you do is you navigate to the console firebase.google.com. I'm going to be dropping that link in the chat as well so that all of you can see it. And then the way that you do it is you go to Firebase, just like the way I am right now. So the first thing you do is you go to Firebase. I'm going to be moving this over so that you can see that I'm doing exactly the same steps. For those of you who are starting right now in Firebase, this is very easy. You get a free tier account under Firebase with some decent quotas, which allows you to, ramp up and build like something pretty cool, even on the free tier. So you have some decent quotas even on the hosting, but it's on the free tier. So don't fret like you're going to be charged or anything. You won't. So please make sure to use like a brand new Google account or a Google account that you haven't used Firebase, so that that you won't be incurred into charges or anything. So let's start by creating a Firebase project. So let's go to console.firebase.google.com and let's make sure to create a project. In your case, it will look like this. Because I already have projects, it looks like this. For me, I'm going to add a new project. I'm going to call it exactly the same name. I'm going to say Roman Web App, portfolio, something like that. It says you cannot have these characters. So in this case, you need to do it, for example, like with dashes, which is okay. I'm going to hit continue. I don't need to enable analytics for this project. And you hit create project, and that's it. That's how simple it was to create a project in Firebase. And then you can just use it for any project. You can use it for your web applications, for your mobile applications, which is pretty good. And this is, it takes just a little bit of time. And this is actually built, these projects are actually built on top of the Google Cloud, which is something, very, very neat. So I'm going to hit continue. And then if you see, it's going to land me right in my web application right here. So instead of, I can go over other features of Firebase, but the one that we're going to be using is under build hosting. But Firebase has these rich set of tools and services that you can use to make your applications more secure. For example, using authentication. You can, and also, for example, Firebase app check. You can use, for example, NoSQL document and collection database in Firestore database, or you can use some like JSON-based structure type of NoSQL database using real-time database. You can use Firebase storage, cloud functions. You can manage them from here and all of that. But we're going to be using Firebase hosting. Storage is another thing, but hosting is the one that we're going to be using. So let's scroll down. If you see here, we are already in step number 10. Then I'm going to scroll down because I went through all of these steps. Very simple. Now, how do you set up hosting for your case? In your particular case, you need to install some SDKs. You need to install some CLIs. So if you hit get started on the hosting, the first thing that you need to do is install the Firebase tools. Firebase tools, that's exactly why I needed to have Node.js installed on my machine. So I'm going to be open up another terminal. If you do npm install -g for global, and if you say Firebase tools, then that means you are going to install the Firebase tools. In my case, I already have it installed. I'm not going to do it again. But in your case, you need to have that installed. The next one is you need to make sure that after you install the Firebase tools, the Firebase CLI, you need to be able to log in and give access to Firebase to manipulate your project so that it can push the files on your behalf. So let's try that. If you say Firebase login, in my case, I may be already logged in, but I'm going to log out just to see. I'm already logged in under my account. So I'm going to say Firebase logout. If Firebase logout, it will just log you out. But let me show you how it will look like. It will look like if you perform a login from the Firebase CLI. If you do Firebase login, you're going to get this prompt. You can say yes. And here you get an authentication screen. You get this auth screen where you're going to select which account you want the CLI to kind of have access to. And it's going to use that account on your behalf to do some actions in your project. For example, it's going to see, edit, configure, and delete your Google Cloud data, view and administer all your Firebase data and settings, and also view cloud platform projects. Yes, I'm going to hit allow. And then after that, all you have to do is just close this. And then that's it. You see, you've already authenticated. You've been authenticated with Firebase in your project. Now let's proceed. What's the next step? After I do this, I can immediately just do deploy. So that is the cool thing. After you have to initialize the project, of course. So let me now move this over right here. Now let's perform some of the commands that they're asking. So after I did log in, I'm already logged in. So you need to initialize this project so that it actually installs some of the configuration that is required for you to deploy your project to the web. So I'm going to say Firebase init. This is what initializes the project. So I'm going to hit that. And if you see here, it's asking you through the prompts, you go through these prompt items. So for example, which Firebase features do you want to use? I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard, and I'm going to arrow up and down and find the one that interests me. In my particular case, I want to do the hosting. So let me do configure Firebase hosting and optional setup GitHub action deploys. You can do that. So I'm going to select that, configure files for Firebase hosting. I'm going to hit space to select it. You see that it became green. You see right there, it became green. If you can toggle that, so that means you're selecting it. After that, you hit enter. That is what actually selects it. So I'm going to hit enter. Use an existing project. So that's exactly what I want to do. I want to use an existing project, and I think I already have it right here. So let me just hit next on this, continue to the console. So my Roman web app portfolio, I should be able to see it right here when I say use an existing project and then hit enter. I should be able to see, there it is, Roman web app portfolio. So let's just arrow into it. Roman web app portfolio, that is the one that I'm going to be using. It's exactly the one that is in Firebase. I'm going to hit enter. And then now it's asking which this project needs actually a public folder where your generated assets that are going to be deployed on the web server on the Google Cloud, you need to point it to that folder. So what is the public directory? The public directory that I like to set in this is the actual folder that Flutter uses to build your. So in the tutorial, I am actually telling you which is the one that I want you to use. So in my particular case, I want you to use, let's get back to the tutorial right here. And I am saying the specific folder that I want you to use. After we do the authentication and all of that, and we initialize, I am saying that you need to use the Flutter. I am saying the build web. So that is the folder that I want you to use. In the code, under here where it says build, there's going to be a folder called web. Whenever we build our web application, is going to be there. So Firebase is going to grab the generated files from the build web folder and is going to deploy to the Google Cloud. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So what do we want as our public directory? Build/web. Type it exactly like that. Build/web. So I'm going to hit enter. Continue as a single page app to rewrite all URLs. Say yes, because we want it as a single page app. Do we want to set up automatic builds with GitHub? Let's skip it for now, but you could do that. And then that's it. Firebase initialization is complete. And then you can even see how some files got generated and added to my project. If you see here, under my Firebase, there's like this project and whatnot. So perfect. So I'm good. Now, after this, now we should be able to build our application. Remember, we need to build this application for the web. So you need to build it, build like a release version of this Flutter web application, which is going to generate a bunch of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and some images. And it's going to make it into one single nice package, one single folder called web, and all those dependencies will be there. So now let's build that project just like that. So after that, we can just build our application just by running this command right here. You can just copy paste it from the step. We are in step number 11. So let's just go right down to step 11, and you go to the command line and you paste that, which is Flutter build web. So we're going to build it for the web. And we're just going to use the browser image decoding enabled false. We don't want to do any image decoding at this point. We just want to see your images in an undecoded. And we're going to build it for release. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to be building it. And if you will see now, under the build folder, now you see a web folder, and here is where all the files are going to be generated. So we're going to let it do its own thing. So you see, we're building it for the web. We're generating all these, server-friendly assets, HTML, and all of that. Try not to edit these files because these are generated again from Dart using like the Dart2JS, the way that Dart compiles like Flutter into JavaScript. So try not to manipulate these files because these files are already optimized for that. So all you need to do is just grab these files right here. You see, you get a flutter.js, index.js, main.dart.js. This is kind of like your code, but compiled as a JavaScript file. The same thing with the Flutter. This is kind of like a minified version of the Flutter core, and you get even like a service worker and whatnot. So now that we know the application here knows exactly where it needs to build like the application. So for example, here in the Firebase.json, we know that the public folder is build/web. So it's going to grab those files and upload it to the Google Cloud. So let's try to do that. So I'm going to save here. And now I'm going to deploy my web application, this same application. Now I'm going to deploy it to the web, to the Google Cloud in a public scenario. So let's try to do that. So let me just come over here. I'm even going to close this so you guys don't get confused. And we're going to trigger it later once it gets deployed into the cloud. So let's do that. So I'm going to say, just by running this simple command right here, it will do all of that for you. It will just grab the files from the build/web. It's going to upload them to the Google Cloud. It is going to generate even like a custom URL based on the name of your project. So I'm going to hit Firebase deploy. And while that goes on, again, you see, it's going to do it pretty fast. It's uploading the files. And then it's going to give you this URL right here, like the hosting URL. So this is the URL where your application should be hosted. So all you need to do is just hit this link. Let's open it. And we should be able to see it. Now you should see my image. And now this is publicly available out there. I can even grab this link and drop it in the chat and in the list in there. If anybody wants to try it and see that it's actually fully available, publicly deployed on the web, this is exactly how you can grab like a Flutter web application, and very simple, you can just deploy it to the web, and now you have it available for all your users to see and enjoy. Now, let's say you want to make changes to this application, and you want to say, how do you make changes? How do you deploy changes of this application to, how you make the changes and then how you redeploy those? Well, you're going to have to do the same thing again. You make the changes required. For example, in my case, I want to change the color. Let's say I don't want it to be blue accent. I want it to be purple, for example. So let's do that. So I'm going to change that. Let me rebuild it locally first so that we can see the changes. And then after that, then we're going to redeploy it. For example, we're going to redeploy it to Firebase Hosting and then see the changes in the cloud. Right now, I'm going to redeploy it. You're going to see it right now. We're just going to look at it locally first before we deploy it. And let's see what it looks like. So the new changes is that it's going to be purple, but there's still one that is still blue here. We're going to change that, and we're going to be using our app color. So let's say app color. Let's reload it, and now everything should be purple as expected. There it is. So after my changes are all set, now what I want to do is I want to publish those changes again. Unfortunately, you're going to have to rebuild your application. So you're going to have to do a Flutter build web again. The cool thing about this is that it just overwrites whatever files you have in there. So we're just going to rebuild our application again, which is going to generate a new updated set of bits. And it's going to generate those files in there in the public/web. And then all you need to do is just do another Firebase deploy, and you should be able to see your changes again in the cloud. For example, like if we refresh here, you still see the old changes. Now that the application has been built, you say Firebase deploy. I'm going to hit enter. Now this is going to copy the new files, which we've made changes to. We've made it look purple. Now, if I reload this, we should be able to see the new changes taking effect, and there it is. So if you see, very simple, we were able to build a simple personal portfolio page that you can use to, again, show off your skills in Flutter. You can definitely, create like your own web applications and show it to the world. again, like I mentioned, this is a very the lowest barrier to entry when it comes to becoming a Flutter developer is Flutter Web. And you see how cool the capabilities are for the web. You can reuse a lot of that code for your native applications, iOS, web, desktop, Mac OS, Linux, anything. But the great thing is that you can accelerate in your development. You can put MVPs out there hosted on the web using Firebase Hosting, which is free under certain with some limitations. But you saw I didn't pay any cent, and I was able to have something already secure. If you can see right here, has a little lock, so it's is providing SSL kind of connection by default. You have like your SSH already by default. You can see that your application is already hosted in the Google Cloud for free, and it's a Flutter web application. So I just wanted to say again, thank you everybody for joining this session. I hope you guys can pick up, could have picked up a thing or two, because we definitely wanted to cover a lot within 1 hour. But I just hope that you guys can, just like Scott was saying, you guys can rely on the community to help you with any issues that you may have. You can follow me on Twitter. You can also, follow my portfolio. You can take a look at other workshops that I have developed for you guys, and you can continue on your Flutter journey by following folks like us, like me, like Scott, like that wealth of great Flutter GDEs and Flutter enthusiasts, Flutter developers out there helping the community. So with that, I'm going to close this session. We're going to go on a break. And then after that, we're going to do serverless backends for your Flutter web apps using Firebase. We're going to be going through a case study on how I build a Flutter mobile application built using only Firebase as the backend, which makes it very useful. So thank you, everybody. We're going to go into a break. Thank you, Kevin, for the opportunity to share my knowledge in here. We're going to be right back. I'm going to stop sharing. But we're going to be right back in a few minutes at 2:30 for the serverless backends for your Flutter applications using Firebase. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you so much.